Atabari and good morning, everybody. We're going to make a start. Good morning, welcome to the Sustainability Committee and also the hearings for the Food Resilience and Security Policy. Before we begin, I'm going to start us off with a karakia. Please feel free to join. Me and oi tātou, tū taua mai I runga, tū taua mai I raro, tū taua mai I roto, tū taua mai I waho, kia tau ai te mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, tāeki e. Thank you. Before we get started, we have some housekeeping, which is going to appear on the screen. So for our visitors today, please note our fire and emergency exits, one there and one there. In case of an emergency, we will leave out those exits and assemble by the clock tower into Maraohine. Please no smoking or vaping. We don't do that here. You can go outside to do that, and there is a defibrillator downstairs if we need it. And if you have any accidents, please report it to our committee administrators. Natalia over here. So welcome everyone, welcome members. Thank you to everyone in the gallery today, and just acknowledging that we have the General Manager Strategic Planning, David Murphy here, and we have Natalia Kushnarenko and Sarah Claridge here as our Administrator and Governance Advisor today. So the first order of business is we're going to accept the apologies. So we've got apologies this morning from the Chair, Councillor Brent Barrett, and from Debbie Marshall-Lobb, our Deputy Mayor who's absent on council business. Are there any other apologies? Excellent. I'll move those. I'll have a seconder from Councillor Naylor. Noted. Right on time, Councillor. It was Councillor Naylor seconding that. Great. Thank you. Now call for a vote. That has passed 9 votes for. None against. Thank you. Notification of additional items. I have not been notified of any. Does anyone have any from the floor? No. Excellent. Declarations of interest. Does anyone have anything to declare? Moving on to public comment. I haven't been notified of any public comment. Are there any comments from the floor? Excellent. That sets us off into the hearing of submissions on the draft food security and resilience policy. Colleagues, you have the list of submitters on the run sheet there. So for each submitter, we will invite you down to speak at the submitter's chair. You'll have 10 minutes, including questions. We have all read your submissions, so you don't need to read them out to us. If you wanted to highlight some particular points or add additional points, that's your time to use. And I think that's everything. Oh, we will take that recommendation first, though. So colleagues, we will vote that the Sustainability Committee receive the submissions and hear submissions from presenters who indicated their wish to be heard in support of their submission, and 2, that the committee knows the procedure for hearings of submissions as described in the procedure sheet. So I will move that. Looking for a seconder. Councillor Harpiter, thank you. And we'll take that vote. Thanks. That's passed 10 votes for and none against. Thank you very much. So our first submitter this morning, submission number 39, is Dara from Te Whatu Ora Health New Zealand. That's on page 132, councillors. Thank you, Sally. You've got the silver button on the right-hand side there. We'll turn your microphone on. Red means go. You have 10 minutes. The floor is yours.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. Ko Sally Dara toko ingoa. I work as a health promotion advisor for the National Public Health Service, which sits under the umbrella of Health New Zealand. Our priorities in public health are immunisation, smoking and vaping, alcohol, and nutrition and physical activity. We fully support the proposed food security and resilience policy, and we'd like to congratulate you on the work that you have done so far on this and in the community and responding to the organisations who are working in this space. A policy that is integrated into all council operations, such as the proposed food security and resilience policy, has the power to make a significant impact on food security and resilience within the PNCC area. It's really great to see that there's already some amazing work occurring in the city, and that we've seen firsthand through the Manawatu Food Action Network. I'm always amazed every time I go there just to see some of the amazing things that all our organisations are doing in this space. This policy cements the intentions and the commitment of PNCC to be a partner in this space and gives other organisations confidence that you will be involved for the long term. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sally. I think we have a question for you from Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Sally, for your submission. We've received some submissions that say, oh, this isn't something that council should be involved in, this isn't council business, etc. What would your response to that be?
Well, I think it's something that it really ensures the health and well-being of the community, and food security is a human right, so it's really good to be able to be working in that space to improve the health of your community. And the reality is that it's a lot of the time it's not actually doing lots of big things, it's just changing the thinking about how you might do something. The Bill Brown Park being a good example, where allowing the community gardens to be there. Yeah.
Okay, so is it important to Health New Zealand that there are other external partners involved in public health?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. There are no other questions. So, Sally, thank you so much for your submission on behalf of Te Whatu Ora, and for a really comprehensive submission, and for coming in to share your time with us today. Thank you very much. The next submitter is Josephine Gudru from the Cancer Society Manawatu. That's submission number 29, and that's page 73 in your attachments, councillors. Welcome, Josie. You can move your speaker closer to you if you like, and it's just that right-hand button will hit the mic for you, and your time is now.
Awesome. Kia ora koutou, ko Josephine toko ingoa, ko toitu te whenua toko mahi. Kia ora, my name is Josephine. I am a health promoter for the Manawatu Cancer Society. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on my submission towards the food security and resilience policy. This policy provides pathways for council to initiate change in our food environments. With hundreds of thousands of tonnes of food wasted in New Zealand yearly, it's important we take action to lessen the burden on the environment and our health system. Within my submission, I made several recommendations towards this policy. One I'd like to highlight is the importance of having a stronger focus on nutrition and its partnering role in environmental and public health sustainability. Unhealthy food environments negatively affect our health systems. With increasing rates of poor nutrition and obesity in our communities, our healthcare systems become overrun by non-communicable diseases that have preventative risk factors. Poor dietary habits can contribute to many non-communicable diseases, including at least 12 different cancers. Influential factors from our food environments can strongly control our health choices, especially when it comes down to availability, cost, and accessibility. The estimated cost on our health system from dietary-related non-communicable diseases is about $1.5 billion yearly. We can create healthier environments by prioritising initiatives that change community perspectives and control unhealthy influences. The EPI tool that's attached to my submission was designed by the Cancer Society of New Zealand's research team in Otago University. It gives clear guidance and examples of food initiatives at different levels of implementation. Within the food promotion space, there are various initiatives that council could consider implementing that wouldn't impact heavily on the budget and create healthy, equitable, environmentally sustainable food environments in council-owned, managed facilities and events. such as establishing restrictions on advertisement at transport hubs and sports grounds that promote junk food. Studies have shown that tamariki are exposed to, on average, 7.4 unhealthy food advertisements per hour when outside. This is just from a child walking down the street or playing in a park. Enforcing restrictions on these advertisements in certain areas could reduce exposure to children by 50%. Council's healthy beverage policy is already a great step towards encouraging healthy options in council-owned buildings. This could be enhanced by commitment to increasing access to water, by including water fountains and free refill stations at new council building developments, upgrading parks and playgrounds with water fountains, and promoting water consumption over sugar beverages on social media. Council's commitments to enhancing well-being of their communities can start from increasing opportunities for healthy food and beverage choices. Incorporating nutrition as a focus on this policy not only relieves the health sector, but also enhances sustainable environments. Promoting fresh nutrition food also promotes sustainable living. By choosing fresh, whole foods, particularly those that are locally grown and seasonal, we help reduce environmental impacts in various stages of food production, distribution, and consumption. There we go. Initiatives that support one will often support both. It is often talked about when creating new policies, that if it's something that's just nice to have, or if it can enact change and better our communities. With 15 to 20% of New Zealand's population facing food insecurity and almost 500,000 people reaching out to food banks monthly, while hundreds of thousands of tonnes of food is wasted each year, I'm not sure of a better reason to have a policy that will help support the community to reach food security and decrease environmental strain. This type of policy isn't something new either. Christchurch Council created their food resilience policy in 2014, Wellington Council committed to the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact, and went on to design the Te Anamata Akai o Tō Tātou Tāone, our city's food future, in 2023. Palmerston North City Council could make their mark in achieving a policy that sets an example, like these major cities, to prioritise health and the environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Josie. I just had a question. I'm interested in your point about an increased focus on nutrition and whether, in your view, an increased focus on nutrition might be a byproduct of food initiatives that are happening on the ground, and whether or not you think there is a call for a more intentional focus through this policy.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to when you're focusing on sustainability, you're often focusing nutrition, comes as a byproduct. But if we have that underlying focus as well, it means that we're kind of targeting two things at once. And it means that any initiatives that come up, we're looking at sustainability and we're going to look at how that byproduct, but then also kind of have it there at the start as well. So it's not just a byproduct because it might not come about, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yes, that's a helpful distinction. Thank you. And we have another question for you from Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Josie. So in your submission, you've listed a series of recommendations. Are they things that you don't think are in the policy currently? So for example, the first one is the Cancer Society submission recommends a stronger focus is put in the policy towards nutrition and its partnering role. So is that because you don't feel that that's adequate currently?
Yes, I think there should be stronger wording around nutrition. So all my recommendations, there might be slight hints within the policy itself, but I think there needs to be just a refocus on how the wording is and how we can make those stronger to highlight that better.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Josie. That is all the questions. Thanks for sharing your time and submission with us today. Thank you. Next up, we have Dana Kunaiti from the Nuvaka Trust. Welcome, Dana. That's submission number 48 and page 179 of your papers. Welcome, Dana. You've got the right-hand button there. Red is go, and you have 10 minutes. Time is yours.
Kia ora ana koutou katoatua. Tuatahi ka tuku mihi ki a koe, Katie, nau I tūwhiri tō tātou nei komiti I tēnei rā, nā reira tēnā koe. Ki te komiti, tēnā tātou katoa. We submitted a submission in honour, I guess, of our Pacific communities here in this city. We As you would have seen in the submission and in our presentation, this is just a summary of our strategy and the various services that we provide as New Waka Trust. We are a small team of 13 and a governing board of 4, based in Palmerston North and covering the mid-central region. Based off the last census, the Pacific population is 5,169 here in Palmerston North. The projected population is expected to grow by 3,000 within the next 20 years. And so we have a role and an important part to play in ensuring that what occurs now has a flow and an effect and impact on those in 20 years' time. We are supporting over 1,000 families, and that is growing. And we want to be able to make a difference and support our Pacific communities to achieve their aspirations. The Council adopting this food security and resilience policy is a good pathway to achieving and supporting our Pacific communities to achieve better outcomes. We chose to do a separate submission. However, we are a part of the Ora Connect Alliance. We collaborate with E&M and MFAN, as well as Whakapai Hauora, and we also support E&M's submission as well as Te Aotearoa, who you may hear from as well today. It is important that our Pacific community voices are heard and are included in these policies. We are doing our part to support kai sovereignty in this city. We have a food hub where we give out and distribute free, fresh, healthy food. We have a private community garden, and all the fresh fruit and vegetables that are grown and harvested are distributed to the Pacific communities. We are in the second home gardening initiative that we've run, and we're about to run the third one next year. And really we're about wanting to empower our Pacific communities to achieve kai sovereignty and achieve their wellbeing aspirations. And that is obviously one of the Council's key outcomes also. Also sit on the Kai Security Squad, which is part of the Ora Connect Alliance, and we are actively involved in distributing rescued food on a weekly basis to our communities. We know that, and I'm sure everyone is aware of the increased cost of living, the political landscape that is occurring, and our Pacific communities are one of the most that are impacted by this. So we need to be able to enable our whānau and our Pacific communities to have opportunities to achieve kai sovereignty. In summary, we support the intention of this policy to prioritise and support food security and resilience initiatives in the city. I did have a link to a short video, but I'm unsure whether you're able to play it. It is in the presentation. Okay, that's fine. Me taki ngā.
Okay. We can make sure that the elected members have a chance to have a look at the video.
Thank you.
Thank you for your submission, and thank you for showing us a really fulsome example of some of that work that's happening on the ground and that this policy is trying to assist. And aside from being supportive of the intent of the policy, can you see from this draft policy that it would help you to keep going or to ramp up your efforts or grow your efforts?
Absolutely. I think there are some recommendations in there in terms of, I suppose, some more resourcing, but I absolutely believe that it is, it's all of our responsibility, including the council, and so having a policy in place that supports organisations, not just ours, but number of community organisations and 8 different agencies to support sustainable and environmental food sovereignty is absolutely crucial, and I think this policy goes some way to being able to do that.
Thank you, Dana. We have a question for you from Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and kia ora, Dana.
Kia ora.
In terms of the strategic approach, I was interested to see that you thought that the outcomes of this policy would also feed into all of Council's goals, not just goals 3 and 4 that we had identified. You've given good sort of justification for why you think that in the submission, but can you explain why you think it's important that we do link it to all 4 goals? I guess the question might be, well, does it matter whether it's only linked to one goal or if it's linked to all 4? What do you think the importance of that is?
Sure. I think obviously Whāinga 1, I included some examples there, and it's really about valuing, I guess, and the fact that the communities, this is needed. It's about valuing and supporting the aspirations of communities, and obviously we're here with a vested interest in Pacific communities. It's also about, I suppose, providing opportunities to across all of the council's outcomes and not just a focus on some. And it fits within a number of the council's outcomes from our perspective. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dana, for coming and for your presentation and your submission today. Thank you so
Kia ora,
much.
mai taki ngā.
Thank you. Next, we'd like to call submission number 50, Daniel Morimaya from the E&M Environment Network Manawatu and Order Connect. That's on page 187 of the separate attachments. Welcome, Murray. Got your mic there. All right, you've got 10 minutes. The time is yours.
Cool. Tēnā tātou. Kia ora everyone. My name is Daniel Morimaya, or Mori, as everyone knows me as. I work for Environment Network Manawatu, and I coordinate the Manawatu Food Action Network. Tuatahi, I'd like to tautoko the previous speakers. I support what they've said, and as they've said, Environment Network Manawatu supports this policy here. I've made quite a comprehensive submission, and I was trying to think of what to speak to today, so I think I'm just going to, rather than saying what I've already said in the submission, which you've all got an opportunity to read, I might just give a little bit of a personal example to, I suppose, why I think food policy and security is so important. I was privileged enough to grow up in Tauranga Moana, up in Tauranga, and we had a kiwifruit orchard, and we had land, and we had fruit trees, and we had crops in the ground, and we had vegetables. So I grew up in an environment where I had the opportunity to be able to, I suppose, grow our own food, harvest our own food, and that was something that supported our family and meant that kind of, if there were hard times, we always had that to fall back on. Unfortunately, a lot of people aren't fortunate enough to have that ability these days. There are lots of groups out there that we support within Environment Network Manawatu that do such things, such as Awapuni Community Gardens, Moheki Ave Community Gardens. There's a whole lot of community gardens. There's a whole lot of groups that are doing things, as Nui Waka Trust said too. Food security and food resilience is really important. Food is one of the 4 main things that people need, humans need to live: food, water, air, and housing. So food is a really fundamental human right. And it's not just me saying that, it's actually the New Zealand Human Rights Commission. One of the interesting things I found out in my research about, I suppose, submitting to this proposal is that the New Zealand Human Rights Commission has a very, I think, well-worded section here, and even though it's in the submission, I'm just going to read it because I think it is so important. So that is the right to food, and I'm going to read verbatim here. This is from the New Zealand Human Rights Commission. Everyone has the right to adequate food. That means that the government must ensure that people can grow, produce or get food for themselves and their families. When people are unable to feed themselves, the government must provide them with food. In Aotearoa New Zealand, human rights, including the right to adequate food, must give effect to Te Tiriti o Waitangi. So I might be preempting some questions here, but I know it's been made. Is it the council's role for a policy like this? Absolutely. That's what my position is, and that's what the position of E&M is. And so I suppose I'm going to end very quickly and hopefully leave you time for some questions. This is my wero to you all. is that please ensure that this policy passes and is worded so it will support the current and future needs of the community. I think that this policy is great. I think the intention of it is great, but I also think that you need to make sure that the wording in there is going to reflect what the community needs. And again, I'm just going to pull out one tiny bit from my submission here, is that words matter. And one word that was in the submission was affordable, and that I completely understand the purpose of putting the word affordable in there, and that people can get access to food. I think it's also problematic because the word affordable is only encompassing food as a commodity. It's not encompassing food as a koha, as a taonga that people in the community can share and gift to each other. And that there's many other ways of ensuring that people receive food other than paying for it. And the other thing that I'd like to allude to is that affordable implies that primary producers need to keep the costs down and get paid very little for what they produce. I think it's really important that we value primary producers, we value the people who are growing food, and if you have a policy that's trying to artificially keep prices low, when it might be, for example, if you're trying to grow food in environmentally friendly ways, there might be higher upkeeps, higher inputs into growing food in long-term sustainable ways, and I think you have to make sure that you're not unintentionally going to kind of quash that type of activities. So I'm just going to end it on that and open it to questions. Kia ora.
Thank you. We'll go to Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Murray, for your submission. I see that you have added to the list of objectives of the policy,
Yes.
quite substantially, I suppose. And if we were to consider adding to the objectives, I guess we might be challenged by staff that if you have too many objectives, you achieve none of them. So if in terms of the list that you've added to, are all of those objectives the ones that we've put in the draft policy and your additional ones, do you see that all of those are priorities, or are there some that are more important than others? If we're going to add to some others, some we could reduce. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose what we put in there was based on feedback from our member groups. So something that I think was in the submission was that Environment Network Manawatu represents over 60 member groups. We put this consult to them, and so a lot of these specific ones in here underneath the objectives are related to some feedback there. Yeah, I suppose there's always some that are more important than others. It's possible if we read through them, there's some that can be condensed in terms of kind of like the policy wording. But I also think that there are some there that that are maybe kind of more overarching. So I suppose it's a bit of a funny answer to that. They're in there because we got asked to put them in there. I think there are some really specific ones, such as the minimisation of food waste through community education and support of food rescue services, for example. I think that's a really big part of the localised food chain. And if we're going to be producing more food locally, which is something that I hope is an outcome from this type of policy, supporting more localised food production, I think that's a really important part to be aware of, how you have systems in place to manage the potential extra food waste or things like that. So I suppose that, again, maybe that's a whittle for your policy team, is that, is, as you say, to try and not make it overburdensome by maybe condensing some of those. But I think everything that I put in there, someone within our groups thinks is very important.
Thank you, and it's good to know how that was put together. It's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I just had a question. I was really interested in your comments on words matter and the potential unintended consequences of an affordability lens there. And I wondered if you had a view at all on this, what is our ability to influence affordability through this policy? Do you think there's any teeth there to actually do some influencing?
Yeah, I think there is. And I think Council is probably one of the biggest landholders in Palmerston North region, and obviously implementing plans and bylaws and such have an impact there. And I suppose an example could be, for example, when there's farmers markets going on, my understanding is that these markets are run by people who go and sell, they have to pay money, and they also have to abide by food safety standards and that sort of thing. And although I think food health safety is really important, I think in some cases governments can overreach in terms of what they're suppressing. So for example, if you make it uneconomical for any kind of small growers to be able to sell their foods at a market like that, you're really cutting off a huge potential supply of localised food. And I think you have to be really careful about the types of, and again, this is why I see this policy so important. It's an overarching policy that I'm hoping will affect and influence the council's decisions in other areas and make you think really carefully about, okay, this seems good, but what are the maybe unintended consequences further down the line for kind of localised food? So I think, yeah, I hope that answers the question there about why I think wording really does matter in terms of...
It does, thank you. And we have one more question for you from the Mayor. Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Murray. Couple of things, and I'm sure you do know these, so I'm just going to tease it out. You spoke about bylaws and everything else around farmers markets and hawkers, food trucks and all those sorts of things. You do know that we don't set those rules. They're set by MPI.
I'm unsure of the entire kind of process there. I do know that's there. My understanding was that there's some that are set by local government and some that are set by central government.
Food regulations that definitely come from the government.
Okay.
Yeah.
Looks like I need to go to Wellington to spot on that one.
Yeah. So have you thought of actually, because I mean, a lot of the stuff that you've articulated to it, which is very real, and I don't disagree with any of your commentary, but a lot of it's government related, you know, even some of the comments you started with.
Is what, sorry? Is central
government related?
well,
Have you thought about going to the government? Or?
I would love to sometime if I have the capacity, but I would like to point out that when it does refer to the government, it does refer to central and local government, so it's not just the central government. And I suppose, although I'm not advocating for the local government take on kind of the role of MSD, for example, in terms of making sure everyone, like in terms of adequate food, I do think that the local government, local council does have a really important role to play in ensuring that local spaces, local communities are supported to kind of, to be able to do the things, basically to be able to do the things they're doing already. This is happening on the ground already. People are really interested in local food resilience, growing their own food, sharing, it's happening. I suppose part of this policy is for the council to catch up and support what's really happening.
Do you not think we're doing that at the moment?
I think you're doing it in certain ways in certain areas really well, but I suppose a specific example, and you'll probably hear more about this later on today to do with the community gardens, is I suppose taking down the barriers for people to be able to use public spaces to do those sorts of activities.
Yep, don't disagree with you on that space. I don't think many do around the table either. Okay, thank you. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, and we're being on 10 minutes, so that's perfect timing. Thank you very much for coming in and sharing your submission with us on behalf of ENM and MFAN. Thank you. Our next submitter is Liana Hamlin, submitter number 35. That's on page 116 of the separate attachments. Welcome, Liana. She has a presentation for us. Your mic is already on, so you have 10 minutes, including questions, and the floor is yours.
Kia ora. Ko Liana Hamlin tuku ingoa. I'm also known as Lans within the food sovereignty community here in Palmerston North. I was born and raised here my whole life and am now raising my own tamariki here in Palmerston North and call this place home. I'm here today not only as an individual but also representing Manawatu Māori warriors, a kaupapa that focuses on mana enhancing mahi to the community in regards to food sovereignty. We share this mahi boots on the ground in the community and also share on social media. We are people over profit. Everything I speak to today is of my own beliefs and words and experiences. I have contracted in paid positions and volunteer work in multiple initiatives surrounding food sovereignty and food saving here in Palmerston North, Whanganui, Horowhenua, and also the wider country. I believe my purpose on this earth is to serve my community in this chosen field. I am in support of this policy, however, will be speaking to a few subjects that I have seen that needs addressing. In a world chasing wealth, we often tend to overlook the true riches surrounding us. Bees that pollinate our food, trees that provide us with clean air, healthy food that is available to all without having to rely on giant corporations and the ever-growing prices, and pure water that sustains all life. Nature's treasures remind us that the most valuable things earthside cannot and should not be bought. Rather, we should be protecting and working alongside them. It is the greatest investment we could ever do. No amount of gold, oil, or money will replace the delicate balance of nature. These are the things that truly matter, the irreplaceable treasures of our land, our home, and our earth. True goodness is shown through how we treat each other's and our land when there's nothing to gain. While there are multiple initiatives and groups within this region who are working towards food sovereignty and self-sufficiency, I believe the collective as a whole has lost sight on remembering that every single one of us has a duty to protect, nourish and cherish these kaupapa, for they are the real wealth that fuels life. But too often, sadly, I believe profit over people always seems to prevail. Imagine a world where life was just about creating art, savouring nature's fruits and living in harmony, simple, beautiful, and free from the crushing weight of credit scores, taxes, and the ever-rising of living and food costs. Not to mention the mental strain having to put up with the peer pressure of society and continual control pushed upon the general population. But here we are, navigating a system that is far from the idyllic dream. Still, we can create pockets of that beauty in our lives as individuals and as the collective. Here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, every human has the right to adequate food, and this local council must ensure that this policy will uphold the strong tikanga surrounding that, no matter the age, the ethnicity, or where you sit in terms of monetary wealth or status. My personal and professional experiences within our community around this kaupapa shows me how much more it is needed. A true food system should not only nourish the people, but also our land. Oh, sorry, is this a clicker for the, sorry. Left, right? Sorry. So where was I? A true food system should not only nourish the people, but also the land, and not only rely on chemicals that deplete our health and our soil. Oh, cool, thank you. I'm against the fact that Palmerston North City Council utilise glyphosate so freely around our towns, streets and parks as a means of convenience, when multiple court cases throughout our world have been brought against these giant corporations that provide glyphosate, spanning over years and with payouts reaching in the millions, if not billions by now. This information is not hard to find. We need to start advocating and actioning more for sustainable and organic practices that respect nature and ensure our food is as pure as it was made to be. The future of food starts with conscious choices today, not only for growing and having access to fresh, healthy kai, but also being able to rely on grocery stores, local small businesses, and also markets, where we can go and buy without having to worry about what's been sprayed on our fruits and vegetables, simply to make them look more appealing, to make them look more fresher for longer. Private interest in these giant corporations need to be regulated in terms of this, not only by the government, but by the local council also. Too many fast food options are popping up, trading convenience over health, again, profit over people. We see our country import, export fruit, vegetables and meat, and the dramatic price drops when food hits other countries, yet we have to pay double, almost triple the prices just to eat our own kai on our own whenua. Profit over people seems to be the common denominator here again, and no one bats an eyelid. I believe you should address this for our region more strongly, with a stronger, louder voice. Soil, it aids as an antidepressant, nature's silent healer, packed with Mycobacterium vaccae, a microorganism that boosts serotonin and lifts your mood. Hands in the soil isn't just about gardening, it's about connection. It's reconnection with ourselves, our food and our earth, and it helps individuals to slow down from this fast-paced rat race we call life. Educating children, youth and families is not just about gardening also. It's about planting seeds of independence and responsibility. By nurturing their own crops, they learn patience, resilience, and the joy of creation. These lessons will ripple into the future where they grow not just food, but solutions for a better world. So let's equip our community and the next generation with the tools to cultivate sustainability with one garden, one berm, one native bush at a time. I often imagine our sidewalks filled with berms and fruit trees. One moment. Oh, I've skipped back. Here we go. Sorry. Yes, where was I? I often imagine our sidewalks and berms filled with natives, edible plants, fruit trees offering nourishment and kindness to anyone in need, feeding both hearts and pukus, fostering a sense of community, abundance and care for all, especially for those who need it most. Connecting our community in ways like these will strengthen us and continue to sustain us. The council needs to be able to remove barriers in place that make it too hard for these things to occur. More dui and less hui. Everyone likes the idea of the end result when growing your own kai. However, I've seen it's only worked with people who are either passionate, well supported, determined, or just plain desperate. Funding to support community initiatives in this sector is a big one for me. I believe collaboration needs to be more supported and spread more across the board. Barriers need to be removed in regards to accessing funding. For this, myself, along with many others who I've spoken with personally, who are boots on the ground doing work that matters, some of us do not want to register as a corporation or be held under an umbrella. We purely just want to do it because we love it, producing real results. Thus being limited when it comes to applying for bigger funding. We all still get on with the work and do what is needed because we know it is needed. I believe data reporting with funding in this policy needs to be kept under own initiatives. Transparency is key. Misappropriation of funding and reporting needs to be monitored. A lot receive large funding and then have no idea how to make the most of this money for these initiatives. Lack of true connection and relationships does this. I personally received a small grant under $1,000 and managed to reach over 150 families, and that was just $1,000 in one person. So when funding is received, I believe the reporting needs to be more in depth. Budgets need to be more accessible, not only for council, but the general population also, and needs to be verified. The policy states the outcomes of this policy will be evident through wellbeing indicators, monitoring and reported every year. It says by the committee council, but who specifically will be reporting on this information? Will they be retelling information given to them, or will they themselves be going out in the community to check and get voices from people on the ground? This is where whakawhanaungatanga comes in. In this space, I have learned to watch what people do, not what they say or write. You shall know them by their fruits. I have volunteered alongside Deborah Ranganui with Community Fruit Manawatu, and every year our numbers of food saving dramatically increases. The last few years we've seen tons of fruit that otherwise would have been wasted, redistributed to over 86 initiatives in Palmerston North and the public here for free.
Hey Lance, I just have to interrupt you because your time is out. Did you have a final point you wanted to make?
I did. I was almost finished. My last thing I'd like to say is that we must remember as the collective never to overstep our human rights and the fact that everyone has God-given rights to access our pure water and healthy food. And when putting money into this sector of food sovereignty, you must be very vigilant. For those who don't know me, I have worked in multiple community spaces, so I see a lot. So I'm happy to take any questions. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you, Lance. We're out of time now. Thank you so much for coming to share your thoughts for us, encouraging us to widen our vision about food production, and also for your presentation, showing all the work you're doing on the ground. Thank you. Our final submitter has just arrived. Welcome. I know you're on a tight deadline this morning, so I would like to welcome, if you are ready, Rebecca Culver from Just Zilch. That's a final submission for today. That's submission number 38, and that's page 129 of the separate attachments. And Rebecca, your mic is already on, so you've got 10 minutes and you can begin when you're ready.
Thank you, councillors and staff, for having me here. I know that most of you are familiar with Just Zilch and what we do, and that I was able to recently present to this committee is convenient because you've heard from me recently, so that's good. I think that this submission, this policy is a great idea in terms of making sure that food is available to people in our city. I think that we want to make sure that Palmerston North is a friendly place, right? A place that's known for its kindness. And this is one thing that we can do towards this. I think there's multiple facets to it. I think it does very much involve the community and how we look at using our resources wisely, including land and space. But I also think it relates to the producers and the businesses around and how it is that they are using the land and space as well. I think that we have the opportunity to really make a difference for the public, but also for the businesses that are here and need to operate. As you know, Just Zilch rescues food from anywhere that food is available, and we don't want to see any of it going to waste. If there is community gardens or fruit trees around the city, then we want to work with council or other organisations like E&M and Manawatu Fruit Harvest to make sure that produce is getting to where it needs to be, whether that's through Just Zilch or through other community organisations, so that we can spread the joy of having food around. As I just heard at the end of that last speaker, that it's one of our human rights that we want to make sure that people have access to good, healthy, nutritious food. Questions?
Thank you, Rebecca. First question from Councillor Naylor.
Thanks, Rebecca. I noted in your submission, excuse me, that there was a few areas that you thought were the role of council that we needed to add, and one of those was data collation and analysis and sharing of that information. I'm just wondering specifically what data collation you would like council to be doing in this space.
It's probably the facilitation of the data, if we can collect the data around what food is being utilised. Is it food that is sorry, lost my words. Food that's going to waste. Then we want the data around, okay, so how many kilos are we seeing go to waste, and can we rescue that food? If it's food that is being put that is being utilised by the public, is there data we can collect around that?
And is that data, is that information something that other organisations already in the space, such as Just Zilch, already collect?
So that is information that we collect, absolutely. It gives us that information to be able to say, well, we distribute 10 tonne of food a week. So it's definitely possible to be able to be doing that.
So why would you expect that council should do that as well? Would that be a duplication of effort?
I think it's about the facilitation of gathering all the information and having someone or having a central person to do that. I've also mentioned in there about having someone to facilitate the groups of the different community groups. I think that's a really helpful part for council to play, and I guess that plays into that data collection, and that it would coming to a central space is what we're looking at.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We go to Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks for your submission. I was just going to ask about your comments on the monitoring and review of the policy. So you've suggested that we develop an implementation plan and see tracking of implementation of progress and reporting back to community groups. How would you see that happening? Would you see that as council producing a report that's distributed, or would that be as part of the facilitation of a meeting, or what's your preferred, I guess, method for achieving that?
Look, I think either is completely viable. I guess we value what we measure, right? So same in terms of the data collection. if we value what we measure, we also appreciate that there's then communicated to the people and the stakeholders. So I think, I mean, a report would be great because people wider than just the organisations involved could read it. But even in that facilitation realm, it would provide the opportunity for people to hear and understand it.
Okay, and then you've suggested that because would be a new policy if it was adopted, that we review it in 2 to 3 years. Can you explain why you think a review more closer in time will be better?
Really just an idea to put out there and make sure that the policy is working and doing what we plan for it to do more than anything.
But would 2 to 3 years be enough time to be able to make a judgment on that, I suppose? One question.
Well, I think it would. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I think we'll know if it's working or not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Rebecca, and for your submission, as always. A few of... Is that gone? Yeah. A few of the submitters have commented about, I suppose, food companies, food manufacturers in the region, and perhaps they are taking away from people's food sovereignty. You've spoken sort of the other way round in terms of you utilise the food manufacturers here?
Yes, we do.
So so you've got active sort of contracts or agreements with food manufacturers here to rescue the leftover food?
Yeah, not so much, not written agreements, but understanding that if they've got food that that would go to waste, that we will take that. Yes.
Can you give us some examples?
We work. Well, not so much manufacturers. And my first example is, let me think who we've got. So the distribution centres are places that we get food from regularly, both from Foodstuffs and Primary Connect, which is the Woolworths side of things. We've got places like
that's okay.
Beehive Bacon, for example.
Right.
They occasionally have offcuts or something that the packaging's incorrect or something, and so that kind of thing might come to us as well.
What about fruit and perishables, milk and those sorts of things? Do you get that?
Yes, we do. So, we've got an agreement with Fonterra and Goodman Fielder. So, Fonterra we don't get very much from, but the reason that we don't is because they actually, Palmerston North, you'll all be pleased to know, Palmerston North has the #1 bottling site in the country.
It's pretty efficient,
and so they have no waste. So we don't get anything much from them. But from Goodman Fielder, we'll collect stuff regularly. And often they don't, they aim to make a certain amount and they may or may not sell that. And so we get what's left from that,
right.
Yes. We also get bread that is returned from them as well. So we've got quite a good working relationship with those.
And what about vegetables? Or is that, do other parts of the food rescue sector do that?
We have 1 or 2 places that we also get vegetables from as well. If you know more, please let me know. I'm happy to work with them.
Okay, all right, that's good. Thank you, well done.
We've got about 2 minutes left for a quick question from Councillor Hafeta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hello, Rebecca. One question around you talked about the principles in strengthening collaboration definitions. So I just want you to expand on how you think we'd go about that. You talk about strengthening collaboration definition to include council encouraging the community groups to work together. How do you think we'd go about that?
Look, I think it comes back to the idea of having someone who will facilitate the different groups and who would be involved in food rescue to come together. In the last few years, and it started during COVID, we've had someone who's been in that position. It's been really useful to actually have a central person from council who's outside of our industry just facilitating the different groups, because we all have different ways of doing things and different ways of thinking. So I think it's mainly around wanting to continue that idea on and like keep the strength of that going. So having a central person who's council based who can help with that,
So you think it's council's role to do that?
to help facilitate that. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor, and that brings us exactly to time. So thank you very much, Rebecca and Just Zilch, for really valuable input onto this. We know you have boots on the ground, so really appreciate what you've been able to share with us.
Thank you for
today.
having me.
Thank you. And that is all our submitters. So that concludes the hearings. So thank you to all the submitters in person and in writing, and also to our team for running the hearing logistics. And I understand that's coming to us in February 19th for deliberations. So we'll next touch that then. Right. We'll move on to item 7 now, which is the Draft Food Security Resilience Policy 2024 Summary of Submission. So we'll ask Julie MacDonald, the Manager of Strategy and Policy, to come down. Welcome, Julie.
Kia ora koutou. I'm happy to take this report as read, but I can take questions if you would like.
I have a question from Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Julie. Julie, there's been quite a number of submissions that have suggested additions to the policy or changes in wording or widening the scope. Is that, I mean, how much change can officers bring back, I suppose, without us needing to reconsult? You know, because we're often in this bind of, well, we didn't go out on this, so we can't now put it in. But are you able to just give us a general comment on
Sure.
staff's approach to some of the suggestions that have been made through submissions and whether or not they could be included in the final draft?
Sure. So, I mean, obviously we haven't prepared the deliberations report yet. That will come back next year. Broadly speaking, I would say, from my understanding of the submissions I've read, that often it is a wording change or a bit more of a nuanced approach rather than necessarily dramatically different inclusion of different roles for council or particular objectives. I think that will just be something we'll have to consider as we bring the deliberations report.
Sorry, I turned myself off too soon. Okay, so when officers bring back the deliberations report with any officer recommended changes, it can get a bit messy if elected members then start saying, oh, well, you know, what about this change or the other change that was submitted on that we'd like to see included? So can you suggest the best process for doing that going forward rather than us doing it ad hoc in the deliberations paper?
Through the chair, we'll bring our deliberations report. We will suggest potential changes at that stage. I mean, my view is, I guess, that a lot of the comments that submitters are making is that their primary interest is in how council implements this policy. There's not a great deal of disagreement about the nature of council's role, and so I think there's probably going to be a greater scrutiny on then what. And so, you know, that will be the next stage, and I will address that in the deliberations report as well about how council might then go about involving councillors in the development of implementation. Because as we've pointed out in the draft policy, there's potential for this policy to be integrated across all kinds of council activities. Whether or not resources allow that is going to be something that councillors are going to be needing to talk about.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Julie. Just a quick question, really, just around in the policy itself, the draft policy, you've got a section on monitoring and review. I was just wondering, I guess, your view, just what would that look like in terms of an implementation plan, and how do you see council actually then sort of interrelating that with the food, the food network?
Through the chair, it's a little bit difficult to sort of answer that off the top of my head without having developed an implementation plan. I think that would be part of that discussion. I think Rebecca's comments particularly were really interesting about making sure that the information we have feeds into council's implementation of its activities. For example, we have the waste assessment that gets done every few years that does have, is relevant to food consumption and food waste and those sorts of things. So there is some information available that we would just be able to incorporate into our implementation, but there might also be other activities that council wants to get involved in to, say, highlight issues, or, you know, that would probably fall under that advocacy role that's currently in the guidelines.
So can councillors actually expect us to, well, could we expect actually a little bit more information when the report comes back to us about how that dashboard might be utilised by council?
Oh, you said the dashboard word now. The short answer is I don't know, because we don't yet have an implementation plan, and it's going to be a question of resourcing and the how quickly council could act on a variety of things. The issue of raised expectations has been made throughout the reporting on this policy, and I think there is a concern that there is a really large expectation that such a policy, if it's adopted by council, would be implemented through all areas of council within the first year. Within current resourcing, that just doesn't seem to me to be that realistic. I could be wrong, but so I think that how we report or monitor or develop new sources of data or even measure or monitor our own performance is going to be something that we need to consider through the development of the implementation plan. It will follow the adoption of a policy.
Yeah, okay. Probably it's, I suppose that what I'm trying to actually get at here is, would the intent of the implementation plan and the dashboard be to actually support better collaboration and better delivery by stakeholders for food sovereignty, for example? Is that the intent of it?
I see. Yeah. So one of the guidelines proposed in the draft policy is to support initiatives that are happening in the community through the development of the policy process. One of the things we've heard in the community is that there are already lots of amazing things happening, and that council needs to take those into account as it's enacting its own direction. And I think that's why quite a lot of the direction of the policy is about council doing its own things in its own activities, because, for example, we have a lot of control over public space or planting. And another of the guidelines is talks about supporting those initiatives in the community.
Great.
So an obvious outcome of that would be supporting collaboration, supporting how the community is working together and with council.
Thanks, Julie. Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Harpiter.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you, Julie. You talked, and where Councillor Johnson was talking about potentially resourcing. Will the implementation plan come back with a potential how much this is going to cost in terms of resourcing this policy?
That's probably really a question for SLT to consider. If council adopts this policy or an amended version thereof, we would look throughout the organisation as to how the policy would be implemented, and perhaps bring back some, or at an SLT level, talk about how that might look or the ways in which that could happen. It may be that there are some small and easy and cheap things that are just about how we do the things we do already, which I think has been addressed in the previous reporting, or there may be new initiatives or new funding or new additional things. And so I think all those things, the policy is written at the moment, all those things would be on the table.
Because one of the points that Rebecca brought up was the encouraging the groups to work together and that being coordinated by someone from within council. What's your view on that?
I'm probably not the person best to answer that. It's probably more of an Amy question.
Okay.
But I think that's something we could address through the deliberations report in terms of council's current role in a variety of areas, and what we do now and what we could potentially do in the future.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And the Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Julie. It's nice to see a very brief policy rather than 50 pages, which is great. Just following on from Councillor Harper's question, don't we already provide, don't sector leads do a lot of this sort of coordination work already? Like we significantly fund a organisation in this space.
Are you talking about Environment Network Manawatu? Yes, they do receive sector lead funding, is my understanding.
So why would we get another, and I appreciate some submitters have different views, why would we get another council person to, wouldn't we be better to just say this to the sector lead as part of their agreement with us, please coordinate these people?
Through the chair, I'm not aware of a proposal for another person.
Okay, well that came through in some of the submissions today. Okay, all right, I'll leave it to comment, thank you.
Thank you, Julie. That's all the questions. Excuse me. So we have a recommendation that the committee receive the submission, summary of submissions for the draft Food Security and Resilience Policy 2024 presented to the Sustainability Committee on 4th December 2025. I'll move that. We'll seek a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Hancock. And we'll open that for any comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And look, just want to thank staff and also all the submitters that showed real interest in what is a pretty important subject around food. And it's something that this city and region does at a world-class level. Should we be supporting this sort of work or be involved in this sort of work? I think we should. But I found conflicted there at times of whether they were talking about the government or us or perhaps regulations which we seriously... I just hosted the hospitality forum yesterday, and everything we talked about was legislation where we're just the local agent, the council which implements that. The regulations and that were set from MPI or another government department. So there's a bit of confusion, I think, by some of the submitters if it's government or it's council. But can we do more around public spaces? Can we supply or support community gardens better? Can we have a little bit more coordination around planting? Absolutely, I think we can. And I think that can be done better internally with our existing team. But providing extra staff for corralling the sector together, making sure waste from our significant food manufacturers in the city, and it's evident some submitters don't want food manufacturers. They feel that that's the, I forget the words, was profit over people, I think. And again, you have to, everyone's got entitled to their opinions. But it actually is, it's a big multi sector employment sector for us. But can we get the waste from, and it's great to hear that some companies don't have a lot of waste, probably talking more to Rebecca's Just Silch submission is around how do we coordinate a bit better some of that, the waste from some of those manufacturers. I think that can be easily done by a sector lead or somebody that's a little bit more in the space rather than council officers. So I suppose I'm saying I'm supportive, but I'm just a little bit wary of whose swim lane we should be in and whether we would be as effective as somebody that is more passionate and understands this sector a bit better. But supportive, I think there's some really, excuse the pun, low-hanging fruit around public spaces, being a little bit more amenable to these community groups that want to set up gardens, supporting perhaps some of the community gardens. I'd be more supportive of making sure that we had some KPIs around are there more community gardens around the city, and I believe there's people that probably would do that from all parts of our city. And plantings, we do a lot of plantings through our parks and reserves. Maybe we can influence a few extra things there as well. I'll leave it at that. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yes, I mean, I want to also thank the submitters. I think we got some very thoughtful submissions on this policy, and I was impressed with the range of suggestions for how we could strengthen it and gaps that had been identified that we might be able to fill in the policy. So I am hopeful that some of those very sensible suggestions can come through in the final policy. I think that having a policy like this will enable a food resilience lens to be put over different areas of council work. So I wouldn't see this as needing, extra staffing, but it's when decisions are being made about a particular piece of council work that the food resilience policy would come into the mix in terms of how decisions were made, and that we would enable staff to be making decisions taking into account the aims and objectives of the policy. So I'm not thinking that this would need its own separate department of council, as I think some people are concerned about. But at the same time, it shows intent from council, and it shows an understanding of, and I think a number of submitters commented on this, the sort of universal nature of food throughout the whole of council's work. It's not just related to the community sector or the resilient sustainability sector, but actually goes across all goals of council. I do take on board the caution that we heard from the officer that really that the implementation plan is going to be where it's at for this policy, that the policy will be one aspect, but what happens from then is perhaps more significant. So I look forward to seeing that coming back to us. But it's clear that this is a policy that's very much supported and needed by the vast majority of submitters, and particularly those already working in this space. And so I'm hopeful that at the end of the day we will be able to come up with a suitable policy that doesn't overcommit council to be doing lots of things ourselves, but to be supporting and facilitating the sector that's already doing the work. Thanks.
Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Here in New Zealand, the necessity of having organisations that are distributing food to the community is increasing more and more every day. With infill everywhere, with housing corp houses now with no land whatsoever for vegetable growing, the days where someone was put into a state house and they had a quarter-acre section to grow their own vegetables and fruit, etc., is gone. Not only is it the ability to be able to have a garden or a vegetable garden, the skills to be able to grow vegetables is a dying skill. With my last employment, we used to have a grandparenting situation, and I remember going to visit a 14-year-old boy who was in a grandparenting situation, and he was hoeing a rows for potatoes in the backyard, and he was as happy as Larry, and he never realised where potatoes came from. The skills of gardening are going, and the need for food outlets like Just Zilch, etc., are increasing. And I think it's a stain on our society.
Thank you, Councillor. And just to add my agreement and thanks for the comments, I think the scope and the nature of what Council's role in food security and resilience will be is the real crux of what this policy is trying to define, to nail down what our exact role will be and what the scope of it is. And it's really based on those gaps that were identified in the research report that was done by Kate Harridge. So I just want to acknowledge her for that, that very thorough and comprehensive report. And we have seen the submissions broadly in support of where we've landed with that, but perhaps seeking some more nuance or maybe we need to work on managing those expectations of what that might look like at implementation stage. But they're keen to see that we're acting appropriately and to a standard where we can be effective, but also I think it's there to, and what we've heard through the submissions is that we're keen for this to continue to be community-led, because that's where the real CAI champions are doing the work already, and we are a supporting act in this sector, an important supporting act, but we're not the champions here. As the Mayor pointed out, we are supporting those champions doing that important work and trying to recapture those skills, as Councillor Finlay mentioned. So really interested to see what's going to come back in the deliberations report and to picking this conversation up then. So with that, we will take a vote. Thank you. That's passed 10 votes for and none against. It is my intention now to take the minutes of the meeting from the 16th of October, take part 1 and 2 together, unless we want those separated out, and then we'll break for morning tea after that. So move to item 8, which is the recommendation that the minutes of the Sustainability Committee meeting of the 16th of October 2024, part 1 public and part 2 confidential, be confirmed as a true and correct record. I'll move that. Seek a seconder. Councillor Harpiter.
Madam Chair, I'm actually not listed in part 2 minutes, and I don't know why I'm not.
Oh.
I'm in part 1, but not part 2.
Oh, I'll just check on that. Okay, we will look into that.
I can't second them.
Okay, so we'll take them. Great. Councillor Hancock, would you like us to take them separately?
Yeah, I think I was here. I was here for part 1, but I'm not sure why I'm not in part 2.
It might have been an early departure, I'm hearing.
It doesn't say.
Oh, I think that is mentioned on page 45, I think I'm hearing. Thank you. So was that Councillor Hancock seconding? Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, would you like us to take those separate? Yeah, we will take those separately, thanks. So we'll just wait for those to come up. Okay, ready? Great, so we will vote on number 1, the part 1 public minutes. Thank you, that's passed 10 votes for, none against, and we'll move to number 2, the part 2 confidential minutes. Thank you. That's passed 8 votes for and 2 abstentions. Thank you, colleagues. We'll take a break now and we'll be back in the chamber at 22. 10:40. Thank you, everyone. Right, no mai hoki mai te whānau. We are ready to resume. Thank you. We are starting with item number 9, the Community Gardens Simplified Process. So we'll invite Aaron Phillips, the Activities Manager for Parks, and Amy Vowles, the Manager of Community Development, to come down and present that item. That's on page 53 of your agenda papers. Ngā mihi kōrua.
Morena, Mr Mayor and Councillors. As you've requested through the long-term plan resolution, we've brought back a simplified process for the community gardens guidelines to you. We're responding to your direction and feedback from the community on the process as being a bit too onerous. The main simplifications in the process have been to remove the requirement for a legal entity or an umbrella organisation, as sometimes has been considered for groups, and allow individuals to be leading in informal or less structured groups for running community gardens. We've suggested reducing the reporting processes to council, and there's two options there that I'll explain a little bit more shortly. And we're proposing a less extensive or intensive community engagement process about proposed garden locations, and specifically no hearings. You've had hearings this morning on a policy. In the past there would have been hearings for proposals for a lease or a licence on reserve land, and we're suggesting that we remove that part of the process. We've presented two simplified options to you. They're basically the same, except for the last step of the process. And I guess our question, we've recommended that you can delegate the authority to make a decision on a garden to the Chief Executive or officers, but we've left an option in there in case you wish to make final decisions around a garden. But we're suggesting that rather than the process of us reporting with a proposal to consult on a garden, consulting on the garden, having hearings and reporting back, it would, if you chose the option for where you would make the decision, it would be one report at the end of the process rather than 2 or 3 stages. So that's the main difference between the two simplified options. The report identifies a few risks. We believe they're manageable, but everyone's tolerance for risk is always a little bit different. We're aware that there could be a perception if the gardens aren't well run that they are gardens for individuals, that you know, Aaron and his friends have got a garden and it's not really a community garden. So we'll manage that through the community development team and relationships with whoever's running the garden to make sure that it is a community garden, not a garden for some individuals. There are some risks that in the past there's been opposition to some garden proposals. I guess if there were opposition to some garden proposals in this sense, there'd be less formal opportunities for those opposed to make their views known to you. But we're comfortable that as officers we can kind of identify the level of risk and make some decisions about how we report that to you if it looked like it was going to be an issue. And there's a little bit of insurance exposure that council might be liable through public liability if something went wrong at a garden. For example, people were stacking pallets against a boundary fence, and we often get fires lit in parks, unfortunately, in rubbish bins or if the opportunity arises. That's manageable through the permit agreement, but doesn't eliminate the risk. We need to make sure we make the garden organisers aware of those sort of risks. Sometimes they're not aware of how frequently we deal with vandalism and fire in parks. The small or manageable caveat to the process we're suggesting is that we're about to, as you're aware, we're preparing a general reserves policy, and in that we would usually talk to the community about the sorts of things that they're comfortable with or how they want things managed on our parks and reserves, and we'll bring a report back to you in the new year for a draft general policy, and in that we will reference that we will be supportive of community gardens and follow the simplified guidelines that we've proposed to you today, and the community would have the opportunity to provide feedback on those guidelines and our general policy through next year. So we have noted in the recommendations that when that process is concluded, we'll just touch base on the garden guidelines again to see if there's been any strong or any views presented back from the community that might mean we want to edit the guidelines. in some way. So hopefully I've covered the fundamentals, and happy to take questions.
Thank you, Aaron. Amy, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I think you did a pretty good job.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, we have some questions for you. So we'll go first to Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Amy and Aaron. I just want to be sure that I've understood what's been proposed correctly, so bear with me. So the interim Palmy Community Garden Guide in attachment 1, that allows for officer delegated decision making and not coming to council at all, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so then point 4 that you've got in the recommendations, that the issue of permits for new community gardens will be brought to council for a decision in the interim, that's just until you've completed the reserve management plan process?
Correct. I didn't explain that, and apologies.
No, I just want to be clear that I've understood. So is that because you feel that the public haven't had an opportunity to give an opinion about the process, and that this is a kind of an insurance to bring it through council up until then? Is that the reasoning for that?
It is. It's an opportunity for the community through that general policy process, the general community. To date, the consultation on the simplified process has been dealing with the enthusiasts and advocates for community gardens and the supporters of community gardens, but not the general community.
So if we didn't support recommendation number 4 and we just wanted to go straight to officer delegation full stop, do you see a problem with that?
The risk would be if during the general policy consultation there were opposing views that the guidelines were too permissive or needed to be amended in some way, that we had potentially approved gardens in the interim that hadn't taken on board that feedback under the Reserves Act process. I don't see it as a high risk, but there is a risk. I guess I'm a little bit, not jaded is perhaps not the right word, but in the past, community gardens haven't necessarily been all support. We've had a number of gardens in the years have been, there's been quite a lot of community debate about, and sometimes they've been opposed. Yeah.
So I'm just not quite sure why we can't approve the garden guide and leave it at that, why it's got to be contingent on another lot of consultation and policy making.
We're just trying to, in some senses, we're a little bit cart before horse in that we're trying to manage the Reserves Act processes at the same time as approving use of public land for groups or sets of individuals. So I guess we were proposing a halfway step just to ensure that if there was a conflicting set of views, that we'd shown that we'd taken the opportunity to consider those over the next 6 months rather than taking the full step straight away.
But if there were conflicting views about a specific garden, they would come through in the consultation that the Community Garden Guide requires groups to do to establish the community garden, wouldn't they?
They would. The difference would be ordinarily under the Reserves Act we're required to report to you, and the council would make the decision. If we've delegated the role to officers, there's just that tension that we've done that before we've done the reserve management process. I appreciate it's clumsy. We were trying to find a sort of a compromise.
Is there not always the option for officers to bring a decision to council if they're uncomfortable with it? So I will reference the decision around the public toilets at the bottom of Albert Street that was brought to council, even though officers were delegated to make a decision, but because it was looking like it was going to be controversial, it came to us to do the decision. So would that not always be an option for you?
Yeah, that's a fair point, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Aaron and Amy. Actually, my questions were quite similar to Councillor Johnson's, really, just trying to understand why there needs to be a number of steps. So would there be any issue if we approved the community garden guide in attachment 1 today, not as an interim, but just approved it as a guide?
Just the tension that I've highlighted where if the community during our consultation on the general policy thought the guideline was too permissive or too permissive, and we might come back to it and review it because there've been a number of submissions that raise points that we hadn't thought of. It's not a high risk, but it's we were just trying to manage those two processes.
And in addition to that, would it be necessary, if we chose not to progress recommendation 2 or 4 and just acknowledge that those processes were happening, and if there was any concerns that we would expect officers would come and make us aware of those, do we need recommendations 2 and 4, or could we simply progress this guide and progress 1 and 3 today? Is that an option for us?
Just need a moment, Council, if that's okay, just quickly make sure I understand the...
Yeah. It just seems a bit complicated.
Just got to go to the General Manager of Strategic Planning for a comment.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, I think just one thing we'd have to think about is recommendation 3, as I read it, only applies to existing community gardens operating without a lease, not new ones. So if the intent was that the Chief Executive could approve existing and new, then recommendation 3 would need to change.
However, does the garden guide, not in attachment 1, isn't that a description of what's outlined in option 2 anyway, which gives the Chief Executive that ability?
It may be, but I guess the recommendations are explicit to existing though. Recommendation 3.
Okay, so how do we approve option 2 as outlined in the paper today in its entirety? Would we just put new instead of interim?
Yes, I take it you would just approve recommendation 1 if that was your intent to approve the interim, the Palmy Community Garden Guide 2004.
Okay, so would we not need recommendation 3 then for the existing ones?
Sorry, I've gotten slightly confused, so I just want to make sure I'm answering the question properly. So your intention would be that if you wish to just approve the garden guidelines and none of the other recommendations.
Well, what's outlined in option 2 appears to create a straightforward option for us. And if we wanted to just approve that today without the other, it feels like we're making it a little bit more complicated than it needs to. I'm just wondering if there's a more straightforward way to move directly to that, noting that these other processes are in place, and noting that if anything comes out of those that we should be aware of, that officers would let us know.
Yeah, under that scenario, I'd suggest recommendation 1 and 2 be approved, but you might, recommendation 2 is just noting that if during the general process there were a number of issues raised, we would come back as part of that general process.
Okay, so we could just do 1 and 2 if...
Just further to that, you could make an amendment to recommendation 3 so that you delegate the authority of the Chief Executive. So that would be delegate authority to the Chief Executive to issue permits to community gardens and stop it there, consistent with option 2. And that way you've made an active decision that is going to the Chief Executive rather than something that's coming back to Council.
Okay. Madam Chair, I'm happy to indicate that I'd be very happy to move or second those changes if thank you. That's all from me.
Thank you. While we're just working on that, we'll move to comment from Councillor Dennison.
Questions, Madam Chair. Just in regards to the agreement, so I know there's an outline of the fee of $50 to $150 annually. Can I understand that the lease arrangement, is that just an annual, proposed to be just an annual approval aligned with that permit?
Yeah, it's consistent with the support and funding policy, and it's been in place for a number of years for all groups that take out leases and license. Apologies, I might have misinterpreted your question.
I'm just wondering, am I understanding that the agreement is an annual permitted agreement and wouldn't consider a longer, like a 3-year
Apologies, I
arrangement?
misinterpreted the question, councillor. No, it's a semi-permanent permit, so to speak. It might have some, it would have some clauses about when the permit would end. If, for example, council found that the garden wasn't being maintained, and despite efforts to contact the group, we had been unable to establish that it was being looked after, and so on. But it isn't proposed to have a term.
Just in the longevity, is there proposed that there isn't a conclusion of review? I'm just thinking of relatable examples like the Waterloo, how they were said that they had a garden behind the Waterloo Crescent, whatever it was, in the Waterloo Park. And say if we had formalised something like that seemed like pretty relaxed, and then council wanted to take back the land, or for whatever reason, or repurpose that land, where would we have the review on that?
Councillors, a permit is something that is contained within the Reserves Act and is quite different to a lease. And permits and concessions are normally for things like grazing and semi-permanent activities. So we don't have a standard council permit as such document, but we could certainly prepare one of those. But the intent with a permit is that it is a more temporary use of a land than a lease is.
Okay, thank you. Just in regards to page 66 on our agenda, which is going into the actual proposed guidebook, it's got spaces, and its references under space. It says, ensure there is enough room for garden and sheds. And as far as minor edits, I wonder if we can just keep that singular rather than a plural in the text in there. Is this the time to kind of consider some of these alterations?
Yes, I understand there's a standing order for minor edits to things that are approved by council, so we can do that.
Okay, and then on a similar vein, that composting area, we've got setbacks for buildings, but I wonder about composting having some setbacks. I'm just thinking some of the adverse effects that might cause us problems, just having definitions around those expectations as well. It's kind of silent on, it mentions sheds but not composting areas.
Noted, we'll do that.
And the other thing, it seems like many reserves will have other users, whether it's a sports club doing trainings or a community group in the hall or something like that. I'm wondering why we don't necessarily go to the neighbourhood, but the actual other users of the park that are formalised in some way, that actually they get some input into the decision.
Yes, that's the intention. We'll still consult the immediate neighbours and the users, and include signage on the site for a minimum of a month where people who pass through the reserve can see what's proposed, but a little bit less extensive in the past that might have used 500 metre walking distances, etc.
Okay, that's great. That's a great reassurance from my mind. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and moving to the Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mine isn't really, well, it probably is a question. If we were to move 1 and move 3 with a few further alterations, so it finished after community gardens, getting rid of operating without a lease, so it's just nice and simple. That council delegate authority to the chief executive to issue permits for community gardens, full point, to the officers. And I just don't know why we've got 2 and 4 there. Do we need 2 and 4? I'm trying to simplify things. I feel like we're tying ourselves in knots.
So absolutely you could go with the amendment you've got there. It just doesn't mitigate the risk that Aaron has raised earlier about the fact we're in a general reserve management consultation process. That's all.
I totally understand that, and that's the level of risk I'm okay with. You made some comments, Aaron, that there's a whole lot of adverse community feeling towards this. Do you know something that I don't know or other elected members don't know?
Sorry, I perhaps didn't explain well. It was in the past. I've been involved with 2 community garden proposals in the past that there was a lot of agitation and opposition to, in some of it quite agitated.
Okay, all right. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. That is all of the questions. So thank you, ngā mihi to the officers, and thank you for your work and your report. We're going to take these. We're going to take these to first from the Mayor, seconded by Councillor Naylor. That Council approve the Palmy Community Garden Guide 2024. 1, and 2, that Council delegate authority to the Chief Executive to issue permits to community gardens. Mr Mayor, would you like to speak to that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, I think we've heard from the community that they want a little bit of a simplified process. I appreciate what the officers are doing here, and they've done some really, I think the Community Garden Guidebook is pretty good, along with a few minor amendments, as Councillor Dennison suggested, which possibly will take the angst out of, compost bins right up against a fence or dozen sheds on a community commons sort of ground. We've just heard about the food security policy and trying to help the sector. I think this goes a long way towards doing that. Appreciate that local government is a creature of all the different acts, but sometimes we do tie ourselves up in knots, and we just sort of saw a bit of that going on previously. But that's not to say that the officers weren't protecting the risk levels as well. I think there's pretty low risk on this if it's done well, and I think it will be done well because we've got a guidebook. Previously, when the officer was speaking about adverse reactions, there was no guidebook. It was done on a bespoke sort of nature. This gives a lot more understanding of what can be done, what the general guidelines are, the benefits, and I really just want to get out of the way and let the community grow things. So I think this is a good way of doing that. Appreciate the officers' work they've done in the background. I think the levels of risk to us are very low. There's still a whole lot of interaction that would go on with the community. And as we know, if somebody doesn't like it, they'll let us know. They'll let us know. So I think if you could support this, I think we'll just start to get things. We'll go a long way to helping some of those earlier submissions around food security. So please support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Absolutely support this, and was heading that way myself. One of the things that we're often criticised about as a local authority is too much red tape, too many regulations, too many processes that people have to go through. Here's an opportunity to make things a bit simpler. It's been well and truly asked for by a number of community groups over a long period of time. And I think that, we've all expressed frustration at being tied up through the going out for consultation, having the hearings, then having to go back with a solution. And, the process has taken a lot in terms of time for us and for people who want a community garden, and effort. And if we genuinely want to facilitate more community gardens, which I think we all want to do, the process needs to be simpler. I'm very happy with the Community Garden Guide as attached in the papers, and I think we should just go straight to it. I don't really see any need to be cautious in terms of having it as an interim guide and then doing the reserve management process and all the rest of it. Look, if we've got it wrong, as the Mayor says, people will tell us. I think this could be an example of where we're not, as Councillor Finlay would say, procrastinating, but we are actually getting on with something as quickly as we can and allowing the community to get on with it too. And really, I appreciate that the officers have mentioned that there's a level of risk. I'm prepared to accept it. I don't think it's an unacceptable level of risk at all. I actually think that it will be very much appreciated by people. It's something that's been I've heard nothing but support for, to be quite honest. Now, I know the officers have referenced community garden discussions in the past, but to me, some of that angst has been raised really by the process that's been involved in setting up a community garden. Now we've had many successful examples of community gardens across the city. I don't think there'll be that level of concern from residents. In fact, I would imagine that most residents would be happy to have a community garden close by. So I would ask that you support this. I think the alternative is just stringing it out for another 6 or 8 months until we come to the same conclusion. So let's just crack on with it.
Thank you. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Very similar to the previous two speakers, I'm really happy with what's been outlined in this community garden guide, and thank the officers for the work. I do think option 2 does outline a much simpler process, which is 2 to 4 months rather than the lengthy process that was frustrating many groups. And if we can just endorse that, I've got confidence in the officers that if there is anything that comes up through those other processes that we need to consider, then I'm sure those will be brought back to us. In terms of the options that were outlined on page 58, the other comment I wanted to briefly make was in terms of the funding for these groups, if they don't have a legal entity, there is limited opportunities for external funding. But my understanding would be that if a group does wish to have a legal entity, that they would still have that opportunity for external funding, as is the case with some of the models that we do have using reserve space at the moment. So I'm not sure if that would be something that would be included or as a minor edit, but I do think that that's useful for groups to know if they did choose to go down that route. It could be advantageous to them in terms of external funding. But once again, really appreciate seeing something come to us that streamlines the ability for our community to operate in an activity that is totally consistent with our goals and objectives as a council and as a city.
Thank you. And Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Chair. Also supporting the comments before me, but I think this is very positive. We've seen in the submissions in the earlier item the need for food sovereignty and resilience, and so this here, putting in the community, it has multiple benefits as far as creating a catalyst for connections around the community to interact in a common interest. There was an example used with $1,000 supporting 150 families with some fruit or some produce. That was, man, if we could leverage that, especially with the prices at the supermarkets over this last year, has just been kind of astounding, really, for people to giving a choice to actually have access. Otherwise, many cases the space is just getting mowed, and many of them are passive reserves. You can walk a dog over it, but can't we share the space and actually also go and plant a tree or produce some vegetables? So I think it's just a really proactive way of responding to the community's desires around this sort of aspect. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. And I just wanted to add that how pleasing it is to see this report. I'm 2 years into first hearing from the Roslyn Commons project, Said Help, and it's really great to see this document removing barriers and cutting red tape. It's a really great example, I think, of collaborative conversations with our community, and where we've heard the message and then we've been able to really, really engage and listen to what the community has been saying, and then to respond to that with improvements to overcome those obstacles. So it's a very satisfactory result, and I have most sincere thanks to Amy and to Aaron, to Marty, to Kathy, to all of your work, and to E&M, MFAN, PPCT, Roslyn Commons, and the whole foodie network who's taken the time to contribute to this and tell us what they want and to help us to get there. So I think it's a really great example of listening and responding. And I think I'll just leave that there and send us to the Mayor for a right of reply.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to emphasise the headline in the paper tomorrow. Council cuts red tape on community gardens. So I think that's been well and truly emphasised by you all. Could I just make the final note? There's also a number of community or neighbourhood gardens on private land too. I'm aware of some at Kelvin Grove and Akatari and Summerhill. So, I mean, there's this makes it perhaps easier for some people that want to just do something in their neighbourhood and utilise a big backyard or a big front yard. So I think we should be aware of that as well. But look, we're going to put the effort now into setting up a garden and growing things rather than on leases and associations and everything else. Groups still have that option if they want to set up an association and access some funding, but really community gardens are relatively simple to run and do because you use the power of the people and volunteers. So anyway, I hope you support this. Thank you.
Thank you. We will take the vote. And that has passed unanimously with 10 votes for and will be very gladly received in the community, I'm sure. Thank you, colleagues. We'll move now to item number 10, the Nature Calls Quarterly Update. So we will welcome Mike Monaghan, Manager for and Anna Lewis, the Project Manager for the Wastewater Discharge Consent Program, and they have a presentation for us as well. Ngā mihi korua, we're in your hands.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Mike Monaghan te kuingua. Good morning, Madam Chair, Councillors and Your Worship. Thank you for allowing us to come and present the quarterly report update today. You will have read in the report a couple of references to a workshop that was due to be held today. That workshop was, a decision was made to postpone that workshop until February on the basis that it wouldn't impede any progress to work. So what we've done instead is we've just brought a couple of slides really to highlight some of the progress that we have been making over the last few months on this project. So we might just kick straight into that. Apologies for the amount of detail on this particular slide. The intention with this slide was just to highlight to you the timeline of our programme to hopefully bring a BPO for a decision to you in June. You will appreciate the start of next year is a really busy year for council. There's a number of public consultation events happening, and also one of the big drivers for this timeline is the national wastewater standards that Taumata Arawai are working on. What we're expecting as a sector is that they will release some information to the wider water industry round about March for a consultation document on the new proposed standards, with the intention of those standards going live round about August time. So what we're trying to do is time our technical piece of work once we understand what the standards look like, again on that no regrets basis. The work that we've completed so far for step one, we originally had the date of November on step one, but because we've pushed the workshop to February, we've changed that to February. So what we've been doing as a team is we went away and we reviewed the long list of options with a view of bringing a list to council to start working through what those options look like. Mainly looking at original options for the first round of the BPO with a number of reworked options and even a new option in there that wasn't considered last time. We've also engaged some external independent technical experts to review the options. These experts were sourced from a number of countries, not just New Zealand. I think we had somebody from Australia, the UK, and a New Zealand-based expert as well who gave us some reviews. And we've been trying to work out the recommendations from their work back into our work as well. And also, since the last time we presented to you, we've implemented the new structure that we brought last time. You'll recall we brought a methodology and a new structure for the project team. That structure is now in place, and we're operating to that structure. And the last slide that we've provided for you today is really just kind of talking to the importance of the new standards. And until we know what the new standards are, you know, we can't really progress too much work in that technical space. However, we have also gone out to a number of organisations internationally as well, just to make sure we wasn't missing any tricks. Council tasked us with going to see if there's any new technologies that have become available since the last time we looked at the BPO. So we've done that, and we've had some conversations with some people, and there's a number of technologies and a number of treatments that we'll start to work in once we get to the technical review phase, as we understand what the new wastewater consent conditions start to look like. So really with that, and that's a really flyover, but with that we're happy to take the report as read and move into questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Question from Councillor Naylor.
Thank you for that. And just looking at the presentation, step 1 and step 2, step 2 has got the review options against wastewater standard and cost, finalised shortlist. Now I'm just wondering, in terms of, in the minutes of the meeting, it talked about the MCA process, and I'm just wondering at what stage does the weightings for that MCA process get determined, and does that come back to us for endorsement?
Thank you. I think, and we may have discussed this at the last committee meeting as well, at the moment we don't have a lot of clarity about the wastewater standard and how it will interact with the RMA. So currently there's a consideration, and hopefully stop me if this gets a bit jargon-like, but the RMA has a requirement for a BPO process to be undertaken. Is this the best practicable option that we can come up with? And the MCA process is a assessment tool that helps facilitate that. Yeah. Currently, with the wastewater standard not having more information available, what we don't understand is if Te Mata Arawai go to a easier consenting framework, then we may not have to go through that complicated process to determine an option. So until March, we won't know what that looks like. There has been some discussion about if it was a controlled activity or a permitted activity. What that does is says, actually, if you meet the wastewater standard requirement or at the end of the pipe, therefore your consenting process gets much simpler. So we, at the moment, don't quite understand whether we still have a MCA BPO process that is required under the RMA. And that's something that we're scratching our heads a little bit about how we continue to program.
So what it would be the expected process to go from a long list to a short list at the moment then?
Thanks, Councillor. We would be bringing, first of all, we bring the long list in a workshop form to Council in February for discussion, and then followed up by a Council paper for Council to make that decision on producing a short list from the current long list.
And what would be the purpose of the workshop?
I think it would be to inform and to bring Council on the journey of where we're up to so far, to make sure that we're sort of hitting the targets that you expect.
Sorry if I've missed something, but so how do you get from the long list to the short list? And that if we've got a workshop, then a paper will come to us, but what are we using, what framework are we using to go from a long list to a short list?
Well, there'll be a number of things to consider. One is obviously affordability cost within the framework that you've set for us, and secondly, measuring against the original project objectives. So not an MCA process, but looking at what we set the original project objectives to be. Which of the options we bring to you actually meet the objectives that were set by Council for the beginning of this process?
Okay, so would we expect that April stage to have costs of each option?
Indicative costs, Councillor.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Just a couple of questions. I suppose I'm still a little bit confused in terms of the work we've completed to date, which is really around concept design and also development of our resource consent. Is all that stuff has been completed, I guess, in sort of draft. So then we've actually got this big unknown, which of course is the National Wastewater Standards. what exactly are the risks in there? Could we be in a position that by sort of, I guess, March, that we're actually sort of having to go back and do a rework over all that stuff that we've done already?
Thanks, Councillor. That's a really good question. The what the standards will indicate to us is what level of treatment we need to achieve with whatever we go in and do a concept design for. But a decision before then, it will also be about deciding on the receiving environment. You know, last time you remember, we had options going to the ocean, going wholly to land, going to split land, river, going 100% to river. So all those options are back on the table whilst we do this work again to bring to you a revised set of options for council to make a decision on what the receiving environment firstly will be, and then the new standards will indicate for that receiving environment. For example, there's going to be a suite of standards for if you're doing land application, there'll be one set of standards. If you're doing potentially like a wetland environment or an ocean discharge or a freshwater discharge, there'll be a rule book for each of those options. And only when we know that can we go and do that detailed technical work to design and come up with a price for a process that will which will tick those boxes.
Yeah, thank you. Interesting place to be in, I guess. Just in terms of the report talks about engagement with iwi downstream. Is there any subsequent update to the time that you've actually written this report now in terms of progress on that?
Yes, we've engaged with obviously with Rangatane, with Ngāti Whakatiri, and with Te Tūmata Tahuki, who's a collective of Hapu from downriver, and we now have an agreement to have a representative from each of those iwi to come along to start involving them in our more technical meetings, which happen on a regular basis. So that's happened. Also, there was, you'll see the report mentions that there was due to be a meeting in Foxton. Unfortunately, one of the key stakeholders was unavailable, so we've had to postpone that meeting. We've not got any further updates on the reschedule for that yet.
Good, thank you, Mike. Thanks, Anna. Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hapata.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm just looking at the minutes of the 9th of October, and it talks about central government legislating regions to join the water entity. How are you going and progressing that when it talks about us and the other regions forming this group?
Well, we could have a really good conversation tomorrow about that, Councillor, if you'd like to keep your powder dry for that one.
No, I just want to ask, has any discussions with the other councils actually started?
Oh, yes, yeah, absolutely.
So that's, I know that we've got a meeting tomorrow, but I just want to know, has discussions started with other councils?
100%, and we've been engaging for the last 12 months with our neighbouring councils in the region.
So, that's it?
Just, sorry, what was the question? Was the question, have we engaged?
Yeah.
Yes, we've engaged.
Yeah, and progress?
Progress is well, it is in the report for tomorrow, but I guess it's the progress is more about your decision around how you wish to take that forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just a couple from me. There's great news in there about the optionality for the biosolids strategy for June 2029. Just noting that was pending the soil quality monitoring results. Do we have a plan if that comes back with a barrier for us?
Yes, so where that piece of work is up to, we've been doing some infiltration testing, so this is, don't want to get too jargony here, but just making sure that there's enough of a clay cover on that part of the landfill to accept those biosolids. The step from here is to meet with Horizons to understand whether the current consent allows us to use that area, and then there may be some, we need to establish the the steepness of the slope, for want of a better word, just to make sure it's that the area is suitable to apply that compost to. And if it isn't, we may need to go away and do some reshaping and do some forming work, which will obviously have some cost associated with that. So we'll come back to council once we understand a bit more about what that means. But yeah, it is good news that we've potentially got a solution for the next 5 years while we work on our medium and long-term options.
Excellent. Thank you. And just on the infiltration and inflow strategy that you mentioned there as well, I was just for my understanding, the theory there is that if we are more effectively managing contamination from unintended waters upstream, then that can have a downstream effect of lessening the requirements for what we're required to do at the treatment plant.
Yep, so two things about that, Councillor. The first one is the infiltration testing we've done on the landfill is more about to make sure that the clay capping is secure so that anything applied on top of the landfill doesn't leach into the landfill. That was that comment. But you're right, the inflow and infiltration strategy, which we're just at the beginning of that work, could have some major benefits to council if we can control inflow from stormwater into our sewer network. It could mean that we end up we don't need to build quite as large a capital upgrade for future growth if we can control the inflows to the plants.
That's great. That's really helpful. Thank you. I think that brings us to the end of questions. So, ngā mihi kia koroa. Thank you very much. All right, members, we have the recommendation to the Sustainability Committee that the committee receive the report titled Nature Calls Quarterly Update presented to the Sustainability Committee on the 4th of December 2024. I'll move that and seek a seconder. Councillor Naylor, thank you. I just wanted to thank the staff for the update. I know that things are moving in pace in waters, as we know and are well aware, and we'll be discussing that at length tomorrow, but the progressing this project is really difficult when the yardsticks keep changing, or as in the present case, are just a complete unknown. And those are reflected pretty starkly in the report in the risks I noted in that report, but I think as that discussion continues and starts to firm up, so will this project start to firm up. So we can't put that cart before the horse before we even know what kind of horse we're going to have. It's great in the meantime to see the progress that you are that you have been making on that biosolid strategy and the I&I strategy. It's really encouraging to see it ticking away. So just well done. It's been a big year of upheaval and change. So ngā mihi to the staff for getting through it, and I'm sure you'll be looking forward to seeing some more clarity as we go forward. And the Mayor has a comment.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I thought that was a good analogy. I think the horse is going to have 4 legs, so we should be running quite well. Yeah. No, just want to acknowledge the staff. It has been difficult. The goalposts have moved a bit, but I think they're going to move well for us, in my belief. Anyway, I'm quite happy to endorse the report, and again, thanks to Anna and Mike, especially, and Julie, who's been in the background of things as well. We're going to discuss this tomorrow in depth, but there has been quite a lot of dialogue, discussion going on. So, as council should know, that there was a joint iwi meeting here in the city a couple of weeks ago. We've had a very well attended joint elected member councillors from all our neighbouring regions. Obviously, a number of drop-in updates. In terms of actually talking to the other partners, the Merrill Forum, which has the CEs and some of the transition teams as well, they've met 5 times in the last couple of months. So there's been quite a lot of understanding people's positions. And as I said to you earlier in one of our previous meetings, Palmerston North's not actually seen as the problem child anymore, because they all have nature calls programs at some stage in their LTP, and with certainly all of them in the next 15 plus years. So that needs to be taken into context as well, because it's a big decision tomorrow about what the future looks like. And we have been meeting with the sub-region as well, including Kapiti, so that'll be a good discussion for tomorrow. But thanks for the update on where we're at the moment with nature calls.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and with no one else in the queue, we will take a vote. Thank you. has passed unanimously. Thank you, colleagues. Moving to our last item, number 11, the committee work schedule, December 2024. Hand over to the manager for planning if you had any comments to make.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one comment, top of page 82, the annual sector lead report from Environment Network Manawatu. We just had some correspondence from E&M through to Amy and connected with the chair and deputy chair. So we're going to look at bringing that sector lead report to the April meeting rather than the February, just due to some timing of reporting and information. So it's the only change.
Noted, thank you. Any questions on the work schedule? Yes, Councillor Naylor.
Just quickly looking at the alternate options for BPO on the work schedule, it says transferred to council work scheduled for 5th of March, which is a little bit different to the timeline that we were just shown in the presentation, which said a February workshop and then an April meeting. I'm just wondering, am I reading that wrong, or?
I can connect with the team and have a look at it.
Sorry, apologies for that. That was sort of a late change yesterday, so I think I can't remember which one it is, but it's just to align to the right meeting. I think there was the original February meeting, which I think we had in the slide, is not the one we're going to. I think it's the one. I think it is going to be March, but I can't remember exactly which one. But yeah.
It could be good to have an understanding.
Yeah,
of that
so
at some point.
we'll clarify that, but that was all done before the things were, that was finalised before that change was discussed.
Okay, thank you.
And we've just got a quick comment from Hannah, Democracy Governance Manager.
I can give you some clarity on that, Councillor Naylor. So there will be a workshop in February, there will be a council report in March.
So the report in March, is that one instead of April? Or as well as? The presentation we just got shown today said April.
Yeah, we'll check the detail that was in the slides that were uploaded last night that were replaced is correct. So what's in your Teams folder, those dates are the correct ones.
So it's April, not March?
Yeah, there will still be a report in March related to this issue as well,
Right.
on a different topic.
Okay.
Perhaps we can get the clarification circulated to members, and then we'll have it in writing.
Further question, and what I'm sort of asking is, will this go to committee and then council, or will it just go straight to council? The nature calls decision.
It's straight to council, I understand.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, and no further questions. Then we will take the vote on the work schedule. Oh, sorry, I will move that we, and seconded by Councillor Harpiter, that we receive the work schedule dated December 2024. And we'll vote now, thank you. And that's passed unanimously. That brings our meeting to a close. It's the final Sustainability Committee meeting for 2024. So thank you all so much to the members, to the staff for keeping us running. And we'll close this out with a karakia. He karakia whakamutunga me enoi tātou kia puta ki te whaiau, ki te ao marama, whakamaua ki a tīna. Haumi e, hui e, tā ki e. Thank you everyone. We're back here at 1 o'clock for Community Committee.